do now rise.
The question is on the motion that the committee rise. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the committee rises.
Madam Chair.
Madam Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 5, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereon.
The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration H.R. 5 and has come to no resolution thereon. Pursuant to Section 4 of the House Resolution 199, the unfinished business is the further consideration of the veto message of the President on House Joint Resolution 30. The clerk will read the title of the joint resolution.
House Joint Resolution 30, Joint Resolution providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Department of Labor relating to prudence and loyalty in selecting plan investments and exercising shareholder rights.
The question is, will the House on reconsideration pass the joint resolution, the objections of the President to the contrary notwithstanding? The gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of overriding President Biden's veto of H.J. Res. 30, a Congressional Review Act resolution nullifying the Biden administration's attempt to politicize the retirement savings of Americans. This is deja vu for the American people. With his veto, the President once again insists on undermining the financial security of the very people who elected him. Republicans will stand with American workers and retirees in protecting their savings. ESG investing puts the future of millions of Americans in jeopardy when they are already facing economic hardships and inflation brought on by this administration's reckless spending. The President says H.J. Res. 30 would make it, quote, illegal to consider risk factors. But that statement is blatantly false and misleading. The Trump rule, which H.J. Res. 30 would reinstate, explicitly states, quote, nothing in the final rule is intended to or does prevent a fiduciary from appropriately considering any material risk with respect to an investment, end quote. Last year, the Department of Labor, DOL, published a rule encouraging retirement plan fiduciaries to consider ESG factors when making investment decisions. Biden protected this rule with his veto. Now, thanks to Democrats, workers can be placed into ESG investment vehicles by default. And if a fiduciary finds that two investments are equal, the fiduciary is allowed to use collateral ESG factors to break the tie without justifying or documenting that decision. This is especially concerning since ESG investments often underperform and are riskier than other investment strategies. The left is using ESG investment criteria as a political tool to cudgel companies into accepting leftist policies. If we do not override this veto, the left will use ESG investing to push non-compliant companies out of the marketplace. Congress debated, and it came to the bipartisan conclusion to overturn the Biden rule. Now the administration persists through executive fiat. Americans invest to secure their future, not to fund the Green New Deal or leftist pet projects. That's why I supported the resolution to nullify the Biden administration's destructive rule. I urge my colleagues to quit playing petty politics and vote in accordance with the best interest of the American people. Madam Speaker, for purposes of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, the ranking member of the Committee on Education and the Workforce, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. Gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the gentlelady for yielding. Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to the House Republican majority's effort to override President Biden's veto message on President Biden's veto of H.J. Res. 30. This resolution sought to nullify a popular and sensible rule that enabled retirement plan managers to make fully informed investment decisions. I commend the President for his veto. Workers should be able to invest their retirement savings in a way that reflects their values, such as combating climate change, without sacrificing investment returns. That's why the Biden-Harris administration issued a rule to clarify that retirement plan managers may consider the economic effect of climate change and other environmental, social, and governance factors, or ESG factors, when they make investment decisions for participants in retirement plans. Simply put, this rule is not an ESG mandate. It just allows participants to make those decisions. Additionally, the rule does not change the fiduciary standard to which the professionals who make the decisions for retirement plans are bound. They must still prioritize the interests of retirement plan participants and cannot sacrifice investment returns to pursue ESG goals. But today's debate is not a referendum on the administration's rule or even ESG in general. We had that debate last month. The debate is about one thing. First, it's about arithmetic. As my colleagues know, overriding the President's veto requires support of 2/3 or 290 members of the House. H.J. Res. 30 passed the House with 216 votes, nearly all of which came from the Republican caucus. So anyone who can count knows that the Republican majority will not have the votes to override the President's veto, and everyone should be asking, why are we going through the motions? And second, the debate is a window into the Republican majority's agenda. Unfortunately, they would rather spend precious time on the floor on a doomed effort instead of advancing legislation that would help put people over politics. While we're considering the veto override, we could have been considering ensuring women received equal pay for equal work, ending workplace discrimination, strengthening workers' ability to join a union and negotiate for better working conditions, help people balance work and family by providing paid sick leave and family and medical leave, or raising the minimum wage. House Democrats and the Biden administration are focused on these priorities and remain committed to lowering costs for our constituents, creating better paying jobs, and making our communities safer. Madam Chair, before I reserve the balance of my time, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record President Biden's veto message on H.J. Res. 30. It says, in part, there's extensive evidence showing that environmental, social, and governance factors can have a material impact on markets, industries, and businesses. But the Republican-led resolution would force retirement managers to ignore these relevant risk factors, disregarding the principles of free markets, and jeopardizing the life savings of working families and retirees. In fact, this resolution would prevent retirement plan fiduciaries from taking into account factors such as the physical risk of climate change and poor corporate governance that could affect investment returns. I ask unanimous consent that the veto message and complete veto message be entered into the record.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from North Carolina.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I am prepared to close if the gentleman from Virginia is prepared to close.
Gentlewoman reserves.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Virginia.
I yield myself the balance of the time.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Today we've heard a lot about ESG and other topics, but nobody made a convincing case that there are the votes to override the president's veto, and that's because the convincing case cannot be made. The Republican majority may think it's a futile attempt to override the president's veto as an appropriate use of the House time and resources, but we disagree. The first quarter of this year is nearly over, and there's no such Republican majority. And there's so much the Republican majority has failed to do to improve the lives of Americans. In contrast, under Democratic leadership during the last Congress, House made significant progress to deliver for the American people. We took action to create millions of jobs, reduce unemployment to near record lows, to save workers' pensions, to deliver historic funding for education, to improve child nutrition, and to bring the number of uninsured Americans down to the lowest level ever. By that standard, this current majority has a long way to go. However, at the very least, we should agree that we can't afford to waste time on futile efforts that we know won't go anywhere. So I urge my colleagues to quickly join me in rejecting the veto override, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentlewoman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I obviously disagree with my colleague on the other side of the aisle that a compelling argument to override the veto has not been made. I believe that we have offered a compelling argument, and I believe there are 2 points of view on what my colleague said about the successes of what our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have done for the last 2 years. We have the highest debt that we've ever had in this country. We are staggering under an inflation rate that is historic. And so we obviously don't think what we've inherited from the last 2 years of total Democrat dominance in this country is positive. But I think we can make a small attempt to make some changes here by overriding the president's veto. So I urge even my Democrat colleagues to vote yes to protect workers and retirees, override the president's veto, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. Without objection, the previous question is ordered. The question is, will the House on reconsideration pass the joint resolution, the objections of the President to the contrary notwithstanding? Under the Constitution, the vote must be by the yeas and nays. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.